Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I am your host, Stephen Heinecker, and I am really stoked, folks, having this guest on my program today. Is what's so cool about it is that he's a guy who's got this small YouTube channel. Now, this is the thing. There's a lot of people out there that I know would love to reach out to me, and they're like, "Oh, he's too big. He'll never." No, I like it when people who's nobody ever heard of has these small channels reach out to me. They have the guts to do it, and I love giving platforms to people because I think what you're doing is really important. And this is, you reached out to me and you told me, Steve, there aren't a whole lot of English language channels that are kind of, or excuse me, Spanish language channels. There's plenty of English speaking channels that are doing it, where we're engaging some of the historical issues and theological issues and stuff. Some of the things that are out there that need to be addressed, and you want to address them within the context of a faithful view, but also a nuanced view. Maybe people who are having faith crises within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There isn't many tools there that are afforded them for people in the Spanish-speaking audience. So what you are, in my opinion, is the Mormonism of the MRF of Mexico. Gustavo Hernandez, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
You had mentioned to me how like Mormonism with the MRF, and I had said, yeah, you're doing the Mexican version of it. Of course, we know we all know Stephen. He's been on my program, and he has a growing channel where he's engaging as a faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who had had some faith crisis in the past, and now he's kind of trying to explore these topics. And you're kind of doing a similar thing. You're from Mexico, and what part of Mexico are you from, Matt, dude?
I'm from Mexico City.
Mexico City. Okay, that's great. Now, I don't really know a whole lot about you. We just taped an interview for your channel. And what's the name of your channel, by the way?
It's called Faith Journeys. It's Viajes de Fe in Spanish, but Faith Journeys in English.
So I will have a link in the description. And what he's going to do for my interview is that he asked the questions in English, but he's going to have in Spanish subtitles for his Spanish speaking audience. And so that's what he's doing. And so I just want to encourage all of you people out there who are viewers of my channel, if you have friends and family that their primary language is Spanish, and you want a great resource where they're engaging some of the same things that I'm talking about, you could check it out on his channel. So look, so you're in Mexico City, and I want to hear a little bit about your background. Before we get to talking about your channel and what you hope to accomplish with it, I want to know a little bit about you. So tell me, I assume you were born in Mexico City. I don't know. Were you born into the church? Were you a convert? Did you serve a mission? Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah, I was born in Mexico City. I was born and raised there. Technically, I live on the state right next to Mexico City, but it's just a 30-minute drive, so pretty much the same. So I was born a member of the church. My dad, he got baptized when he was 15. And my mom was born a member, but my grandparents got baptized a couple of years before she was born. So I was born in the church in Mexico City. I mentioned this to someone one time, and I think it's the Utah of Mexico. Maybe the member ratio is different, but the culture, it's pretty similar in a way that there's this heritage in many of the families who live there. There's been some generations of people who were involved in the church when it was first brought to Mexico. So um, in this background, the view of the gospel is a bit, I don't know, maybe orthodox. And I remember that going to church was pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. Uh, I was, as a kid, and even to this day, I'm a little introverted. And so I wasn't one of those kids who jumped to the pulpit to bear their testimony, or I wasn't those kids who got their testimony um, just whispered in their ear by their parents. That never happened in my case. So yeah, I grew up loving the church. Maybe not. I wasn't a fanboy, but I enjoyed it. Um, I, as for the church's truth claims, I didn't focus too much on Joseph Smith and things like that. I was more focused on God and Christ. So I knew about Joseph and I knew about the plates, of course, but it was something I was very interested in. As a teenager, I didn't really read the Book of Mormon cover to cover. I knew about Nephi, I knew about Abinadi, but I never really took the time to read the book. And while I was on my teenage years, I went on a faith crisis. I think that I will talk about that a little later, but uh, coming out of that faith crisis was pretty eye-opening to me. And this eventually led for me living on a mission. I served in Guatemala for a few months, then the pandemic hit, and I was sent back to Mexico, and I served the remaining months of my mission in Tijuana, Mexico.
Oh, good.
So I've been home for a couple of years now. I've been married for a year and a half, and I started this channel a month ago, and I think that's pretty much it.
So this would be your version of the Book of Mormon, correct? This
Yeah.
is okay. So I think I have a Spanish one. Yeah, and so you just started the channel a month ago, and oh, by the way, Mexico is the second largest LDS population, right? In Mexico, isn't that more Mexican? You're second only to the United States with members, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. I can't
Yeah.
confirm, but I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay. And I'm also curious too. A lot of people believe that the peoples of like Guatemala or Mexico, that they're descendants of Lamanites. Were you guys ever taught that you guys were Lamanites, or how did you view yourselves in the context of the Book of Mormon?
Yeah, in that case, as I mentioned, if you're in Mexico City and there are many people who have been members through generations, you go back to those Joseph Smith times and Brigham Young times, and if you look at the records, they are always eager to preach the gospel to the Lamanites, right?
Mhm.
So they mention that when they go to the Native Americans, and they mention that when they went down to Chihuahua, Mexico, and things like that. So you get the sense that yes, members believe they got some DNA resemblance to Lamanites, but it isn't taught as doctrine or as, hey kids, I'm gonna teach you about how you're descendants of the Lamanites. So I honestly, no one ever told me anything about it.
Okay, okay.
I kind of learn about it as I learn more about the church, but I was never told I'm a Lamanite.
So your mission, how did your mission go? I'm curious as a missionary, because within you're gonna engage people of other faith traditions, most notably Catholic, and also maybe Pentecostal evangelicals. So tell me, what was your engagement with people that were outside? What kind of reception did you get, and were you successful, like baptizing any evangelicals or Catholics?
Yeah, well, before my mission, my interaction with Catholics or evangelicals, those weren't great experiences. I was a little bit um, maybe scared of what would happen. I remember that one time I was just waiting for someone to open the church gates so we could have I think it was a volleyball tournament. And I was just there reading the Book of Mormon. I was just trying to finish it before my birthday. And then someone came and said, "Hey kid, what are you reading?" And I said, it's called the Book of Mormon. It's a scripture that we believe in as Latter-day Saints." And he said, "Okay, okay. So in your introduction, you say that you think this book is perfect and better than the Bible." And I was like, "Oh, he knows about the Book of Mormon." And then he began to, well, pretty much tell me the basic Galatians warning. So I didn't know what to say back then. When I went on a mission, as I mentioned, it was after a faith crisis, so I was more aware of what can be said. Um, so my interactions were mostly people who wanted to engage in a debate, and me not knowing how to respond very well. In Guatemala, for example, a Catholic member told us to teach him. We taught about the restoration. He didn't have any questions. And when we were about to leave, he said, "Hey, I think I have a question." And then he talked about Peter being the rock and how that doesn't really leave room for apostasy and things like that. And I remember that I was caught off guard. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was appropriate. So I just didn't say anything. In Tijuana, in Mexico and Latin America is pretty Catholic, but in these recent years, there's been a rise on mainstream Christianity. So there were many what you call mega churches in Tijuana. So people are a bit more vocal in their beliefs.
Mhm.
So when we try to talk to people, they would usually go back to the Galatians warning and things like that. So we couldn't really engage that much in conversation. Uh, but the people that we ended up visiting and eventually baptizing were uh, people that were Christians. They believed in God, but they weren't really involved in other churches. So that was my interaction with them during my mission.
So I didn't realize this. So this is interesting to me. So I missed this, and that was you actually had a faith crisis before you went on your mission.
Yes.
Okay, so I want you to detail that. Talk about that. How old were you? And what did the faith crisis entail? What was causing your shelf to break or have a crisis of faith?
So I was 15,
Okay.
and there's a bit of background, but long story short, I I was not doing well spiritually and mentally. I
Okay.
was dealing with anxiety, and just the previous year, I went on a depressive episode in my life, and I just stopped going to school. I stopped
Mm.
going out with friends. So it was really hard. So I was just getting out of that phase in my life. And I remember that I tried to grow closer to God and eventually the gospel and the church. So one of the things that I usually uh, did back then was listening to Mormon messages on the church's YouTube channel, just to have a scripture study and things like that. So while I was doing that, I found James the Mormon. I think he's a rapper, and he uploads some songs there, but he also talks about the gospel. So I decided to watch one of his videos, and while I was watching it on my recommended videos, I saw one that said 3 tests the Book of Mormon cannot pass.
Hmm.
So when I was a little kid, I remember that I once found online a video that talked about seer stones. I don't remember what was said in the video, but I just remember a picture that looks like those old newspaper um, comic books about Joseph peering into a hat on the ground. So I just thought that looked really weird, and that was it. I didn't really thought much about it. So when I see this video in my recommended list, I thought, I bet those arguments are pretty lame. So I decided to click on the video just to check it out. And I remember that when it ended, I felt a little bit confused.
Hmm.
I thought the 3 tests, I don't remember the 3 tests, but it was just basic like archaeology and things like that. So I thought, I always thought this was fake or just anti-Mormon lies. But this person brings a good point, and I have no idea what to say. So that eventually led me to other recommended videos, and the 3 tests the Book of Mormon cannot pass turn into why Mormonism is a false gospel, and that eventually led me to uh, what you didn't know about Mormon secrets they keep telling you. And after that, that led to endowment ceremony recorded online. That led to Mike Norton's blogs. That led to Mormon stories, and it was just a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I began to learn about pretty much all the main criticisms. And I, I was also led eventually to see his letter, and I read it. And yeah, pretty much it. the criticisms of the Book of Mormon, the plagiarism claims, the anachronisms, and all of that. The Book of Abraham, the papyri, um, what the church does now with the City Creek Mall, and you know, a few months ago, what happened with Ensign Peaks and things like that. I began to learn about the quotes. I found a website that says that's called "What They Didn't Tell You in Sunday School," something like that. And there are many quotes about. I don't remember who said it, but someone said, "You know what? I'm pretty proud that the laminates are turning whiter," or something like that. And I just thought, "What the heck is this?"
Yeah.
And um, there were other quotes and Brigham Young, and and yeah, in my opinion, Brigham Young got pretty excited when he was called a prophet. So I learned a lot about that time period. I learned about the Mountain Meadows Massacre. And I learned more about Mike Norton, for example. I learned more than I probably should have about the endowment.
Mhm.
I got involved in the Freemasonry aspects of it and polygamy and all of that, pretty much all concerning church history. Began to look at it first from a Christian perspective on how the teachings that God was a man or Jesus is a brother of Satan and things like that, how they contradict the Bible and how that's heresy.
You watched the
And
Godmakers cartoon, I'm sure.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, I watch it as well.
So you're a 15-year-old who's suffering from depression, and then you throw yourself into this world, this world of that you've never had no idea about all this stuff that's out there. And I can imagine that it must have been overwhelming for you. What was well, how was this affecting your mental health even?
Well, for my mental health, something that affected me, it was not the arguments themselves, but uh, the people who were presenting
Okay.
the topics. Uh, because I did feel insecure about the church's truth claims. That was a big part of my questions, like what the heck? Um, but something that affected me was that at the end of every video, they always said, "Oh, poor Mormons," or "You need to be stupid to believe any of this."
Mm.
And those comments were the comments that really made my mental health just kind of worsen a little bit. Um, and yeah, what happened on those days is that I felt bad listening to people criticize my beliefs, and I also felt it was personal, even though some people say it's not personal, but your church is a lie. So I always took that personally.
Oh yeah, of course.
And um, when that happened, um, part of me said, you can just step away. You can just not watch this anymore.
Mhm.
But part of me said, I I don't want to be caught off guard again. I want to be aware of everything that can be said against. Um, so in this moment, I've heard people say that they felt lied to by the church. In my case, I didn't think that. That didn't go through my mind. I was uncertain about the church, but I didn't think that they were lying to me. Pretty much because, as I said, I never read the Book of Mormon cover to cover. I was pretty much unaware of many things, so I didn't really know back. I didn't knew back then um, what things were public knowledge and what things weren't. So I couldn't really say if the church was hiding something or not. But yeah, uh, multiple First Vision accounts, uh, inhabitants in the moon, all of that.
Yeah, yeah. So you're exposed to all of it. So now, why is that? What? How old are you now, by the way?
I'm 21.
Okay, so this is all still very recent, and you just served your mission just recently. So there's still a lot going on here. So I need to find out, how does 15-year-old Gustavo, who has his faith crisis, has a worsening mental health situation going on, feels kind of like bad about all the stuff that he's hearing about. how does one encounter all of this information and then still serve a mission, or find your way back to serving a mission? So maybe talk about how you went from engaging these materials to then finding some semblance of faith, or how did this happen even? Because sometimes when people go down that rabbit hole, they're out, and that didn't
Yeah.
happen to you.
Yeah, so what happened, I think that maybe it's not the best thing to keep you in church, but what happened to me was two reasons. First, my mental health situation. What happened, what caused my depression episode was that I was about to go to bed one night. I was going to seminary next day, and I was just thinking about what we were gonna talk about. We were covering the Old Testament, and we were talking about the plan of salvation, and I began to think about what happens next. We know about eternity, but part of me couldn't really picture myself looking at God or existing forever in an infinite space and I don't know why I was so curious about it, but the longer I thought about it, I began to feel uneasy. I felt my hands were sweaty. I began to feel my heart was pumping faster than it should. I felt it went up my throat. I felt like my stomach was just going crazy. And I don't know why. And later on, I learned about the term, but I had a panic attack as I was thinking about that.
Hmm.
It was pretty intense. It was pretty horrible. It felt like I had my mouth glued shut. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell out, but I just couldn't. And eventually, it sort of ended. I went back to sleep. I woke up and I acted as if nothing ever happened.
Hmm.
A few months later, that came back during a seminary class. So I felt glued to my chair. I felt I wanted to tell someone about it, but I just couldn't find the words to describe it.
Hmm.
And this time, it didn't go away. It stayed with me. And every time I try to explain it, I never think I use the right words. But what I felt back then was pretty much a fear of existing forever and a fear of non-existence.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
part of me said, if I believe the church is true, then I believe every single person I see once lived with God as a spirit. And for some reason, that also made me feel pretty anxious because I thought existing forever, that's pretty scary, but it's also scary to think that one day things will end. So
Yeah.
that thought sort of made me think that,
A literal existential crisis.
yeah. So that made me feel that life didn't make that much sense. You know, uh, I think that sometimes when members say that this moment in our lives, it's pretty small, but it's gonna bring consequences to eternity. I think they see it as motivation and as a great opportunity, but I saw it as horrible. Like, okay, so if this is just a speck in my existence, then what's the purpose of this? What's the purpose of existence if I'm just gonna be around forever and never and never? So that's what uh, made me have that depression episode. So once I'm back in my faith crisis, uh, if I consider that the church wasn't true, and if I even went as far as to consider if Christianity wasn't true, then I would be subject to another existential crisis. So if I don't believe that I'm gonna go on forever, if I don't believe that I'm gonna see God, then what do I believe? That was pretty scary considering that I was just going out of this episode. So part of me didn't go to that route of considering leaving the church because I didn't want to face that. And on the other hand, I was 15 I still live with my parents, and I didn't, even if I thought I'd leave the church, I didn't think that I would just say, Mom, I'm staying. I won't go to church anymore. My parents never forced me to do anything, but I knew that it wouldn't be as easy as a teenager to do that. So, as I said, those aren't really good reasons to stay. But back then, those are the things that kept me from going all in into thinking of leaving the church.
Hmm.
But fortunately, didn't, that was not my motivation for long. That was just while I was learning about the criticisms.
Okay.
And this period of learning about criticisms that lasted like 6 months of just watching YouTube videos and reading the CS letters and reading articles. And I never found an answer from a member. I never saw anyone talk about this. So I was pretty scared that there weren't any answers to my questions. So I remember that one day I was looking at some criticisms of the church. I was just doing my routine reading, and I found an article that said A Faithful Approach to Seer Stones by Fair Mormon.
Okay.
And I just thought, wait, did he say faithful? Is this one of those uh, troll postings that are faithful but aren't really?
Mhm.
I clicked on it and I read it, and that's how I found Fair Mormon.
Okay.
Honestly, I don't look at Fair Mormon that much nowadays. There are things that I don't necessarily agree with, but that was my introduction to faithful responses, to the possibility of having faithful responses to criticisms. So I began to read about the different questions they had. Some of them were very specific to questions that I had. For example, one of my questions was about an incident that I don't remember who it was, but someone went to, I think it was Kirtland or Nauvoo, one of those places, and he said, "Hey, Joseph, I have this ancient text. Why don't you take a look at it?" And then he said, "Oh yeah, that's Egyptian or something like that." And then he said, "Well, Joseph, no, that's Greek." And then he just didn't say anything and walked
The
away.
Greek Psalter. Yeah, it was a minister that took that to him. Yeah. I
Uh,
remember. Hmm.
so I remember that that was something that I only heard about once. It wasn't really a huge topic, but it was something that I didn't know how to take. So I remember that I found an answer to that, and I thought, wow, so there are people aware of this who still believe in the church. And that eventually led me to find Saints Unscripted. And three Mormons back then,
Hmm.
uh, they they were just starting their channel. It was
Yep.
around 2016, 2017.
Yep.
And I watched a video from, it was called the XX Mormon Story. And it was about Dusty Smith. I don't know if you know him, uh, but it's a story about how he left the church, how he criticized the church for many years, and how he eventually came back. So little by little, I was beginning to find some answers. And in my case, I thought, well, I still feel pretty insecure about the criticisms and the church's truth claims. So what I'm gonna do is that I'm going to read the Book of Mormon for the first time.
Okay. Okay. And how old were you when you were reading the Book of Mormon for the first time?
15.
Okay.
This all happened in the
All
same year.
happening at the age of 50. Okay.
Yeah, and I was just about to turn 16. I was going to be ordained a priest. And they said, okay, if I'm gonna go through with this, I need to know for myself if I really do believe in this. So I took my copy of the Book of Mormon. I mean, this is in English edition, but I took it and I said, okay, I have 3 weeks to finish the book. And that turned into reading day and night, as much as I could. And I just went through the whole Book of Mormon. And reading that for the first time was pretty cool to see how the dots connected. Now I understood where Messiah came from, and now I knew what Zarahemla was.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was interesting. That first time I read it, I focused a bit too much on criticisms.
Okay.
Um, Well, I was reading First Nephi, I thought that's where they changed son of mother of God to mother of the Son of God. While I was reading Mosiah, that's the
Yep.
change of Benjamin.
Okay.
Uh, and I was pretty critical about the text. I was trying to be aware, and I was also trying to be faithful, so it was interesting. I read the book, I finished it, I read Moroni 10, so I knelt down, I prayed, I
Okay.
asked God if the Book of Mormon was true, and I finished, and I just thought about it for a while. As for maybe an ensign worthy experience, maybe that's not what happened to me, but I did feel that once I finished the Book of Mormon, my understanding was, I don't know, maybe better than before.
Hmm.
I When I read the Book of Mormon, I did notice all those criticisms, but at the same time, part of me thought, okay, so this was dictated in a couple of months. So I, th you mentioned something similar to Christianity in our interview. So I thought something must have happened. This book is here. It We have witnesses that it took a few months. It was dictated, one draft. I know about the changes, but for the sake of the argument, one draft. And so I thought something must have happened. Uh, and if we have the three witnesses and the eight witnesses, and Oliver, he saw John the Baptist and Moses, Elias and Elijah and Christ. And if he left the church and didn't deny it, something must have happened. So that was my thought back then.
Hmm.
And I began to see that there was maybe another side to criticisms, and I chose to remain in the church, even though I didn't have all the answers. Back then, I still had questions about Brigham Young. I still had questions about um, pretty much everything, but I felt secure when I read the Book of Mormon.
Okay. Hmm. Well, that's really interesting. So even though you're engaging the text in with using critical methods, even kind of deconstructing it while you're reading it, and yet when you're done with it, you actually feel that it kind of maybe centered you a little bit more, maybe kind of was able to give you a bit of a foundation that you could build your faith upon. And that's very interesting because it could have easily gone a different direction and it didn't. And so then you're saying after you read the Book of Mormon, you felt like you could retain your faith. What with your faith journey, where's your faith journey at now? Serving
Well,
a mission and all this. How would you describe what kind of Mormon, if you will, are you?
something that happened after I started to choose to fully believe again, I said, God, I don't have all the answers. I know there's your will, but I'd like some answers.
Okay.
So I continued to go to church, and about a month after, I began to have some experiences that helped
Hmm.
me. For example, I was in a sacrament meeting. I was just um, by the door to close it on the closing prayer, and the the stake counselor was there, and he stood up, and we were just about to finish, but he interrupted the bishop and said, "You know what? I don't know why, but I felt like I needed to say this." And he went on to describe an experience on his mission on how there were people who wanted to learn about the Book of Mormon, but when they went to their house, they knew complete verses of the Book of Mormon. They had read the Book of Mormon, and they were there to trying to debate or discredit the Book of Mormon. And he said that that experience was something that he was not ready for, but that his companion felt really conflicted after that. And he said, Elder, is this even true? And he said, I don't know why, but I felt like I needed to tell you the story and to let you know that I said, yes, I believe it is true. So back then I was thinking pretty much about the Book of Mormon and the Christian criticisms to it. So hearing that was, it was the first time I felt like maybe someone was aware of what I was going through. And a short time later, we had General Conference. I was thinking about how to reconcile the view of the Hebrews and the late war and all those things. And then, as I was thinking that, uh, someone stood up and said, brothers and sisters, I want to talk about the Book of Mormon. And some people say that Joseph Smith plagiarized from other books. And then I look up, and that was Tad R. Callister. And I said, wait, what? He's mentioning about those things? I didn't know. And I, I began to found his BYU talks and his books. Um, and as a Christmas present, one time, I was given this book, The Blueprint of the Church of Christ by Tara Callister.
Okay.
And I also got A Case for the Book of Mormon by him as well.
Okay.
So I began to find those resources, and little by little answers came. Maybe they weren't final answers, but they were some answers. Some came in the form of YouTube channels, some came in the form of Fair Mormon, and some just came while I was thinking about it or while I was reading the scriptures. And this caused for me to be more critical nowadays. Um, I Back then I was obsessed with knowing everything there is to know about the church. So I began to learn that it is important to know about these things, but it wasn't very good for me to be as obsessed as I was back then. I mean, I had to go to school, I had to go on a mission. There were things that I had to do in my life, not just read and read and read and read about this topic. So I I decided that I was going to have a normal membership in the church, what some would call a true believer Mormon. So when went on a mission, I knew about these topics, and when people mentioned polygamy and things like that, I just thought, I know how to debunk this. But part of me thought, you're not here to do that. That's not the part
Okay.
of being a missionary. So it was interesting. I knew about the topics. Sometimes I did mention the things that I learned about my own research, but I I trusted in the church's truth claims and the basic teachings of the Book of Mormon, of Christ, the atonement. So nowadays, I'm still very open to research. There are things that come up every day, and I still have unanswered questions. There's things that I still don't click with, you know. Um, I've read answers, but I'm still waiting for something that can sound more convincing in certain aspects. But I'm a true believer Mormon.
Well,
Um,
here, I'm going to pull up your channel. So this is tell me a little bit about your channel here. You just started it up. It's about a month ago. And what made you decide to let's go through here. Like you got I first of all you're getting views and looks like you've had a few guests on. And I think you said one of them, Dusty Smith. So that's the guy that you watched on Saints Unscripted, and it must have been very excited for you to have him come on your program. So just tell me. So this is the channel here, folks, and I'm going to have a description link in the description, and so I want you to check it out. And now as of today, you have 19 subscribers. I would love it if we could get you to 100 subscribers after you coming on this program. Maybe you'll have 100 by the time this airs, but it's a new channel. What made you decide to do this, dude?
Once I started finding the answers to my questions, I wanted to do something about it. This was back in 2017, and I thought, what could be a good way to do it? I thought a book, but then
Okay.
as I tried to write it, I realized that I'm not very good at writing books.
Okay.
So I said, okay, maybe not that. But what else can I do? And I was thinking about it, and I thought a YouTube channel, but back then didn't have, I didn't even have a phone. So I thought, how am I gonna record this? And are people gonna take a 16-year-old seriously talking about these topics? So I wanted to do it. So I just came back from my mission, and I met my wife. We got married, and at that time I began to see that there were more critics of the church in Spanish, and there are some Facebook pages, for example, that share memes that are meant to be sarcastic at the church and its history. So I remember that I was seeing one, and it said it was Joseph, like the book that you showed me, the a Charmer or something like that.
Yeah, the enchanter. Yeah, we talked about this in my interview.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, the Enchanter, and it was just Joseph saying, like with googly eyes, saying, "Trust me, he said that he would kill me if I didn't marry you," and things like that.
Hmm.
So I thought there are many people whose only source for these topics is this meme. And people say, well, it's just a joke. But I saw people who no longer affiliate with the church, that no longer believe in the church. And when you ask them, why don't you believe anymore? They say, well, because Joseph said, trust me. The angel said he's going to kill me if I don't do it. And what was their main source? The meme. So I
Mm,
thought there aren't really sources.
okay.
uh, And these topics are just covered in a very superficial and
Right.
sarcastic way.
Okay. And so you felt it was really important that a Spanish voice needs to address these, a more faithful Spanish voice, so that you can kind of counter some of the stuff that's out there, and but also you're doing it with your eyes wide open, because you're not afraid to tackle the historical issues and all. It's all because it's all out there, folks, right? It's all out there. So now you got to be able to provide a way, and that's interesting to me, because Saints Unscripted, I was a guest on there, and in one sense, it was a way of telling LDS youth that if you want to learn about the history of your church, one, you can hear about it on Saints Unscripted, but you can also go to Steve's channel to learn about the history of the church. So my channel has become a resource. And again, I have critics of the church come on. I have all these other people come on, I'm not afraid to talk about all the historical issues and the issues, the financial issues of the church. I mean, I'm not afraid to tackle all the issues. But the thing is that this is the issue: is that a lot of the historical stuff that's out there, that these are on what could be called or considered anti-Mormon programs. So when you're engaging these historical issues, they often have the bias of being against the church or are critical of the church, and so they're going to be using the new historical narratives as a weapon. Whereas I think it's more important what you're doing, and what I'm attempting to do by remaining neutral, is to actually address the very same things that are being talked about on Radio Free Mormon and Mormon stories and Mormon discussions, and some of the chief critical things. And they do what they do. That's they're doing their thing, and they have their perspective on that. That's all great. I'm fine with that. But I also think it's important that we also try to do it on a less partisan, more neutral approach as well. Is that kind of what you're trying to do?
Yes, I remember that uh, maybe we're talking a bit too much about Steven. Hi, Steven, if you're watching the video. But I saw his Saints Unscripted interview, and that led me to his channel. And I saw that he had interviews with Dan Vogel, for example, and with Jim Bennett. And I began to learn more
Are you
about
talking about Stephen
criticism.
Murphy? His
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
sorry,
yeah,
Stephen Murphy.
Mormons of the Murph. Okay, yours are going to probably burning right now, Steve. So yes,
So
okay.
I reached out to him, and I just want to say thank you. I think that those channels that I find useful, I try to just let them know that they've helped me. And so we talked through Facebook. His story is a bit similar to mine, So I said, yeah, I think your story is similar to what I went through. And we talked. And I thought, "Mm, I- if you ever do videos on faith journeys, if you ever interview believers and non-believers, I can do it." And he said, okay, I'll keep that in mind. And back in May, I had an interview on his channel. And when we were talking, I felt suddenly this boost in motivation. Like, hey, this works. This works. I don't need to have a studio. I can just do it.
Wow.
So once we finished the interview, um, I said, it's time. I think I need to start now. So that a few days later, I just found a spot in my room that I could record in, and I said, okay, let's do it. And I just did a video as an introduction, and I recorded my story with Christians of the church, and that was the start of Faith Journeys. And I wanted to include people who could tell their stories, and I remember that I tried to contact Citizen Scripted, and I said, I can share my story if you'd like to. And they said, oh, at the time we don't do Zoom interviews. So I said, okay, okay. But at the time I thought, how many of stories like mine that don't really get explored
Hmm.
because it might not really have a happy ending, back then. As for mental health and my fear of eternity, it's not as strong as it usually was, but it's still something that I deal with on a daily basis.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I'm gonna show this up here. That's a Mexican faith journey on Mormonism with the Murph.
oh yeah.
That is so cool. I haven't watched this, but I did see that come up on my feed. So that is really cool. So I'm so glad that you've been on his program to do that. And so that's interesting for me, because for years I was doing the same thing. You and I were probably watching many of the same videos at the same time on YouTube. And for a while, and it was about a little over 2.5 years ago where I started thinking of doing my own YouTube channel. And part of it was I'd watch and I had a lot of different ideas, but I finally thought, oh, maybe I could do like some book reviews. Because I would watch a lot of these programs and I'd be after a while, I was like, you know what, I think I could do that. And then I'd be like, or an interview, a guest would be on a program and the host didn't ask the follow-up question that I would have asked. I'm like, man, they didn't ask the follow-up question. That was like, it was like, and I thought, I need to. I think I could do this because they're not asking the questions that need sometimes that I feel would have needed to be asked. So that was kind of an inspiration. So for you, it was kind of a similar thing. You are actually you consuming all this stuff. You're watching all this stuff on YouTube. You go on one of your. It must have been really exciting, by the way, for you to go on your first YouTube channel with a guy that is and then as you're doing it, you're realizing, oh, I think I'm going to start my channel. That is like such a cool story.
Yes, and eventually I said, okay, I need to have guests. Who can I contact? And I began to talk to some of my friends from my mission, and I was just saying, hey, are you interested? I'm trying to do this. Would you like to tell a story or cover a topic? And some said yes. And for example, the very first guest I had is a friend of mine that I met in Tijuana.
I like that.
And I said, okay, so there are many things that I'd like to cover. I'd like to talk about uh, things that aren't really discussed in Spanish, like maybe the CS letter or things about the Book of Mormon and things like that. So I said, okay, maybe I can find a scholar and talk about that. But when I began to do some research, I realized there aren't many scholars in Mexico or in Spanish-speaking countries. And the scholars that are part of maybe like Book of Mormon Central in Spanish and things like that, they tend to focus more on Nephites and Central America and things like that. So I said, that would be interesting, but I'd like to find someone who I can talk about these other issues and
Mm.
these other topics. So I thought, well, I can only think of people who speak English, and I thought, well, you could talk to them and maybe add subtitles. And I thought, but adding subtitles takes so long. I remember that last Christmas I wanted to show my wife the Muppet Christmas special, and it's just a 30-minute video, and I tried to add subtitles, and I remember that I worked on that for 2 months and I didn't even finish.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I thought I can't do that. But I thought, why don't you try it? Uh, just go ahead, try it, and you can also have guests and 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 speak in Spanish, but you can also have guests
Okay.
and do interviews in English. And I thought, okay, I'll try. So I said, who do I know? And I contacted Stephen Murphy and I said, hey, are you interested in doing an episode? And he said, sure. So we recorded his episode. I'm currently adding subtitles to it. And
Okay.
I said, okay, who else is out there? And one of the main channels that really helped me during my faith crisis was Latter-day Saints Q&A.
Okay.
And I said, okay. In fact, I did write to Jeff Roundy to thank him for the videos a few years ago. I said, okay, I can just contact him again and ask if he's interested. And he said yes. So I interviewed him, and that episode is already in the channel. And I said, okay, let's try adding subtitles. And this time it's a 40-minute interview, and it took me a week to add subtitles. So
Okay.
I thought, okay, it's not as hard as I thought it would be.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
So, uh, yeah, and currently we have guests. They can either tell their own story, their own faith journey, or we can cover topics together. And I do videos by myself. And on those videos is where I try to cover the criticisms of the church. I try to do it in chronological order. So
Okay.
currently I just cover the first edition.
Okay.
And I'm it like I said, there was a time in which I stopped uh, getting updates on the arguments or evidences or things like that. So jumping back into it has been interesting, and I'm just trying to learn things again. Um, and I said, okay, let's learn again. And the first thing I encountered, it's the Ensign Peak fine. So I
Mhm.
thought, oh, okay. So that was something that really was interesting to me. I had to look at different sources, and again, when I was looking at the Ensign Peak fine, I thought, no members covering this topic. I'm just getting this information from Mormon stories.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, yes, there's a need to to cover these topics. So I've been trying to do research again. I got a replica of the 1830 version of the Book of Mormon. And I said, okay, I'm gonna read it for the first time. I think I'm in Alma, and
Hmm.
it's fun, you know. I notice the changes and things like that, but I'm saying, okay, I just want to be aware of it. And also, um, I've been to Utah a couple of times, and a few years ago, I was in Desert Industries, and I found this volume of the Joseph Smith papers,
Oh, wow.
and
Which volume is that? What's
it's the Revelations and Translations.
in which in volume? What volume number is that one?
That volume number, I don't see a, I don't see a volume number.
It should be right in the binding there. Hold up the middle binding.
Yep.
So oh, I see. Okay. So what is okay? Oh, interesting. So what does that cover?
It covers pretty much Revelation
Okay.
manuscripts of Doctrine and Covenants.
Okay.
And it was for $20, and I see that they usually charge 100, so it's
Yeah.
good.
Good. Good.
So as I'm trying to bring guests and I try to do the videos, I I'm biased, of course. I believe in the church, and I've come
Right.
to
Right.
uh, reconcile criticisms with my belief in its truth claims. But at the same time, I don't want to be biased in the same way that those memes are biased, to just share my conclusions
Right.
without letting you know anything else, so you don't reach a different conclusion than me.
Right. Okay.
So I'm trying to be open in that sense, to say, okay, here are the things, here are the answers. I think that I'm a bit more biased than Morph, but I try to
Okay.
show both
And actually, it's
sides.
important that you just let people know this is where I'm coming from, right? And then if you're open and transparent with your audience, is very, very important. And by the way, I'm super curious. I always like whenever I run into people and they tell me, "Oh, I've been watching your channel," stuff like that, or I'm a subscriber. I always ask them, how did you first come about my channel? And what kind of stuff have you watched on my channel? I'm just kind of curious to get kind of your feedback.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned by watching Mormon stories and different channels, I've I saw your episode without knowing I it was you. So I remember that I watched your channel without knowing it was Mormon book reviews. I just thought this is a channel that covers this topic, and I'm just watching this video and that's it. The
Mhm.
first time that I thought, oh, this is Steve from Mormon book reviews, that was honestly, and not too long ago. uh, it was the Hello Saints Rise, and he was in different channels and he was in yours. So I watched that, and I had seen some videos before, but that was the first time I thought, okay, this is Mormon Book Reviews. That's the
Okay,
channel.
got it.
So I began to watch some videos, and honestly, I really like the format. I listen to them while I work. I sometimes listen to Murph, sometimes I listen to you and things like that. So um yeah, it's pretty interesting. Um, with you know, the first time I heard about an evangelical being kind to the church, that was with Pastor Jeff. So maybe while I encounter your channel, it wasn't as surprising, uh, but I really enjoyed it. I really liked the different guests you had. And I think that's something that I've had to learn to be comfortable with my faith crisis. Like I said, what affected me was what the people on the video said about believers.
Yeah.
And so for a time, I was really mad at all of them. And I
Right.
thought they were bad people, and I didn't even want to consider seeing them as good guys, you know?
Mhm.
So once I came back from my mission, I thought I can't keep that point of view. I
Mhm.
I
Okay.
I need to be more open.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I want to build bridges, I can't just think of other people as enemies. So
Right.
I've watching Murph's channel and watching your channel and seeing both believers and non-believers. Sometimes, while I was watching, for example, the Dan Vogel interviews, I thought I don't agree with him, and I'm getting flashbacks of listening to the critics for the first time. But I'm going to listen because it's important. So
Yeah, that's
I've
great. That's good.
I'm
That's good. You have
just
the
getting
right
used to it.
mentality, right mentality to embrace. Because if you're in the arena now, and you're gonna start to get out there, and you need to engage all the different ideas and be prepared. And actually, I'm going to be interviewing Dan Vogel this week as well for my channel. I've had him on once before. A great guy about his new book that just came out, and also about his YouTube channel as well. I have to say, okay, folks, let's just do this one more time. So this is the channel. Let's pull this up here. And I want to, so uh, Viajes de Fe, that is Spanish for faith journeys.
Hmm.
And I know I butchered it, but you're just going to have to, I'm not really good. And then we got Historias de Preguntas Respecta. I can't even say it. What is that? What does that say there? What is that saying?
It says stories about questions, answers, and faith.
Okay, very good. And so then of course, we have your intro video here. I think I'm subscribed to your channel. If not, let's hear. Let's do this right now. So, folks, here I am. I am subscribing. You're subscriber number 20. All right. So here I'm subscribed. I want to encourage you all to check out his channel. Now, many of you, of course, are English speaking people. I just want to let you know that if you like the work that Mormonism at the Murph is doing, if you like the work that Mormon Book Reviews is doing, and you want to be able to share some of this stuff with friends and family that are Spanish speaking primarily. Now you have an option to send them to a place, a safe space for them to learn about the history of the church in a way that's maybe more neutral, or as you say, biased in favor, which is fine. You know, everybody has their biases, and it's good that we acknowledge them. And check out his channel. Dude, thanks so much for coming on the program. Was there anything else you wanted to share with my audience?
No, I think that this, you know, I think that for a while, members and people in general were pretty close-minded, and this is what I believe, and that's it.
Yeah,
There's nothing else to it.
right.
So I think that this past few years we've seen this rise of trying to open ourselves up
Yep.
and learning about each other.
Well, and this is the
And
thing. This is the thing, though, too, is you're young. You're 21, and where we're seeing the exit of the church is people right around your age, and you're probably seeing that in Mexico as well. So I think you also realize how important it is that millennials and young people have a place that they can go to, especially in the Spanish speaking world.
yes, I think that, as you mentioned, currently it's just memes that share
Yep.
church history. So I think that, I mean, I don't know what people are going to do with the channel. I don't know if watching it will convince them that it's fake. I don't
Right.
know if watching them will maybe make them consider that maybe there's more to it. So I don't know how people would take the channel, but I just know that this is something that I'm passionate about, and I'll just keep going.
All right. Well, you heard it here, folks. Check out his channel. I'm very excited to thank you so much for having me on your program, and I'm glad that you're able to come on mine. I just want to remind all of you folks, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for when a new episode comes out. Also remind you that we do have our merch store, mormonbookreviews.com. We have hot chocolate mugs, not coffee mugs, hot chocolate mugs. We have ball caps. We have all sorts of things that supports the channel. And those of you who would also like to financially support the channel, there are links in the description for those of you who'd like to support us on Patreon as well as PayPal. We're going to leave a link there for his channel and for any of the other things that we talked about. I'm going to leave a link for his interview with the Mormonism with the Murph in the description as well. So, folks, just remember the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.